Tijd voor verschrikkelijke Scandinaviërs met gedateerde kleren en lange haren. Echte cultuur uit het noorden. En we hebben het niet over ABBA.
Where exactly in Sweden do you live or do you come from?
So I actually come from Malmö, which is at the very southern tip of Sweden, just on the other side of Copenhagen in Denmark.
So if you had lived about 1,000, 1,200 years ago, you would probably have been a Viking, or certainly, because this area is crucial in the Viking world. If we would check your DNA, I'm sure that we would find some Viking remnants, some Viking blood.
In het Gallo-Romeins Museum van Tongeren kan je tot en met 15 maart de tentoonstelling Vikingen bezoeken. Wij gingen alvast een kijkje nemen met één van hun nakomelingen.
I don't know what you think of when you hear the word Viking.
Well, I've heard an awful anecdote that the Vikings, they used to all spit in a communal bucket, and that used to be their shower, you know? And
those are kind of images that you also see in TV series and in films.
Yeah.
But in any case, and that's what we try to show in the exhibition, this image of the Vikings is full of clichés and stereotypes, and that recent archaeological research shows a completely different culture. What you see here is in fact a copy of a real Viking helmet, and as you see, it doesn't have horns. These horns are something that originated in the 19th century, and I can show it like that, is that the horned Viking helm is just our imagination. It does not correspond with reality.
yeah, that's a very nice display. My first contact with the Vikings was, I think, through school, and also because it's a rich part of Swedish and Scandinavian history. But in Sweden you don't study Viking culture and history in depth, so I have the same myths and perceptions of Vikings as most people do.
One of the stereotypes about the Vikings is right. They were, or some of them were, violent. There was one thing that they were not good at, that was making swords. The Franks produced swords of a much higher quality, and Vikings came to continental Europe to buy or sometimes to steal swords and use them in battle. Of course, Frankish kings were not so happy with it, and at a certain moment they forbade their people to produce swords for the Vikings, because of course you don't sell or you don't give weapons to your enemies.
I was surprised that Viking society was very well organized, that in fact Viking society wasn't entirely made up of warriors, it was also made up of farmers and people who worked the land. So that was a very interesting perspective to have, a more realistic perspective of Viking culture. Would I like to live in a Viking society? Actually, to be very interested to see what it's like, you know, to be a bystander, you know, to travel back in time and just sit on a bench and see how they did things. But go back and live that time, I'm not quite sure I'd be willing to die at the age of 30 because of malnourishment or because of the cold. So